Now let me tell you a little bit about the difficulties and tests of the prophets of Allah. In a hadith we learn, the Prophet ﷺ said, we prophets are given double trials, double tests, multiplied, just as we are given double reward. So their tests were doubled, multiplied. Why? Because their rewards were multiplied. Do you know the story of Yusuf a.s.? His life was what? Basically, a life that was full of tests. At every stage in life, there was a test for him. When he was young, little, very young, what happened? His brothers were jealous of him. And have you ever had that feeling? That imagine in your own house, there are people who don't like you? How difficult it would be to survive on a daily basis. To live on a daily basis. To live with people in your own house, people who don't like you. You know, sometimes it happens that girls, when they get married and they're living with their in-laws, they're constantly getting these vibes. My mother-in-law doesn't like me. My sister-in-law has a problem with me. My father-in-law, he has this against me. So what happens? She feels as though she's in a prison. She just wants to get out of there. So in every little thing, she's making an excuse to go out of the house. Right? Every break, every weekend, or every vacation, she wants out of the house. She wants to get away. Why? Because she is not comfortable over there. She cannot be happy in that house. When is she happy? When she's out. Now imagine Yusuf a.s. living with 10 brothers, because one of them was with him. So 10 brothers who were jealous of him, who did not like him. So much so that they wanted to kill him. They plotted in order to kill him. And then eventually their plan was just throw him in a well, and then eventually somebody might take him and he might end up somewhere else. Not our problem. As long as he's far from us, we're happy. Now imagine, first of all, he had to go through this test. His brothers are jealous of him. Then imagine a traumatic experience like this, being thrown in a deep, dark well all by yourself. And you don't know if you're ever going to come out. And you don't know if you come out, what's going to happen. And imagine when he's taken out, imagine yourself in that situation. You're taken out, you think, finally, I can go back home. But did that happen? No. The test only increased. He was sold as a slave. Imagine the child who was loved a lot by his father, who had this dream that one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant me honor. And now what's happening? He's sold as a slave. And when he's sold as a slave, alhamdulillah, the master is good. And you think, okay, things would get easier. But what happens? As he grows older, his physical appearance becomes a fitna for him. A great test for him. Something that he didn't have much control over. And the situation that he was in, he was a slave. And his master's wife is after him. And then, when he refuses her, what happens? Does she say, okay, fine, never mind? No, she gets a whole lot of women. Before it was one woman, and now it's a whole lot of women. And then what happens? You'd think things are going to get better. But he ends up in prison. Did you see that his tests only increased in his life? Every stage brought a new set of challenges. A new set of challenges. And when he's in the prison, what happens? The two people, he interprets their dreams for them. One of them, he tells them, when you're set free, make sure that you mention me before your master. And this very man, he forgets to do that. He doesn't care about Yusuf a.s. And then eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends Yusr in the way of Yusuf a.s. Because after usr comes Yusr. After difficulty, there comes ease. So eventually there was ease for him. But we see that the prophets of Allah, they were tested most severely. Most severely. Why? Because they had a great mission to accomplish. And if you don't go through tests and trials in your life, you cannot be purified. You cannot be refined. You cannot get better at what you do. If everything you do is easy, you don't know what hardship is, then you don't even know what your best potential is. When is it that you realize your best potential? When you are in stress, in difficulty. Then you realize, oh, I am actually capable of cooking 2 things in half an hour. I am actually capable of cleaning up in 20 minutes. I am actually capable of this, of that. And if things were easy, we wouldn't realize our capability. And if we don't realize that, we cannot accomplish much in life. So Yusuf a.s., when he was made to go through all of this, in reality what was happening, he was being trained for something much, much more greater and important. Because when he came out of the prison, then what did he become? He was appointed over the khaza'in, over the treasures of the land. So basically, you can say that he was like a finance minister or something like that. But remember that when he was a slave, he was the slave of who? The wazir, who was also a government official. Now imagine being in the house of this person. He was exposed to a lot of politics, a lot of financial matters. So all of that was basically what? Training. It was training. And that self-control, that no matter how much world is put before you, no matter how much of the pleasures of this world are put before you, you have to keep away when something is wrong. What happens to people when they're managing finances? There is a lot of corruption, right? Because money, it tempts you. But Yusuf a.s., he was sadiq, he was truthful. And he remained like that. He was not deceived by that money that was all before him. Why? Because he knew how to control himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trained him. And when Allah gave him that high position, it was then that he was able to establish a family of believers in Egypt. Because remember that he called his family over in Egypt. When eventually his brothers came, he told them, bring your families. They all lived in Egypt. And then Islam spread over there. And then the people of Egypt learned about what Islam was. Because before that it was all idolatry. But remember that when their descendants, the Bani Israel, when they forgot what the truth was, they deviated from their religion, it was then that they suffered a lot. Right? So anyway, hardships are what? Training. And the messengers of Allah, they have to perform the greatest task of conveying the message of Allah to Allah's people. And for that, they have to undergo that training. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 13 years of persecution in Makkah. 40 years before that, when he was not a prophet, did he undergo hardship? A lot of it. Think about it. Someone who became an orphan at a very young age, how difficult it must have been. And then losing his grandfather, that was very difficult. But all of that was training. For what? For performing the task of conveying Allah's message to people. Because that is really not easy. In a hadith we learn that once a companion, he visited the Prophet ﷺ when he was really sick, and the Prophet ﷺ was suffering from a very high fever. Very high fever. So that companion Abdullah radiallahu anhu, he said, you have a high fever. It's really high. Is it because you will have a double reward for it? The Prophet ﷺ said, yes. For no Muslim is afflicted with any harm, but that Allah will remove his sins as the leaves of a tree fall down. So yes, double fever also. Why? Because double reward. Because the task was great. And we see that they were extremely patient, despite these hardships. We see that the prophets of Allah, they suffered from illness. You think about any kind of trial in life, the prophets of Allah went through that. Ayyub alayhi salam, did he not suffer from illness? For how many years? According to some narrations, about 18 years. Can you imagine a person being sick? Sick for how long? Not 18 days, 18 years. What happens to people in general if they're sick for such a long time? They lose faith in God. They lose hope, all hope. But we see that the prophets of Allah, despite the hardships that they faced in life, they were very, very patient, and they only got closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is an example for us. In a hadith we learn, Abdullah radiallahu anhu, he narrated, it is as if I am looking at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was speaking about one of the prophets whose people had beaten him up and wounded him, physically abused him. And he was wiping the blood off of his face. And he was saying, O Lord, forgive my people as they do not know. Forgive my people as they do not know. Imagine if somebody slaps us. We would begin cursing them immediately. Immediately. We turn away from them and, promise never to speak to them again. But we see that the prophets of Allah, they were so patient despite all of the difficulties that they faced. They were still well-wishing and sincere and patient with their people. And you know how they got this training of patience? All of the prophets were made to look after who? Animals. So basically they were all shepherds. And when you're dealing with sheep and goats, you learn a lot of patience. You know how? Because when a goat runs away from you, can you just yell at it and say, come back here? You could yell at the top of your voice, threaten it, I'm going to slaughter you. Is it going to come back? No. What do you have to do? You have to come up with some alternate way of getting the goat to listen to you. Isn't that so? Getting that animal to listen to you. You have to build a relationship, right? Why is it that certain people, when they have pets, they tell their pet one thing and the pet responds? And another person could tell them 1,000 times, but that animal will not respond. Right? What's the difference? What's the difference? One person dealt with that creature with patience, with that sense of responsibility, with that care and concern, built a relationship with them, and then what happened? Eventually that creature responded to them. And now, he doesn't need to be told. He will respond to sounds. He will respond to sounds. I remember I was very young once, and I went to this farm, and there were lots of chickens over there. And obviously, I wanted to hold a chicken. And what happened? I started running after the chickens. But what happens when you run after the chickens? They run even faster. Right? They will jump here, jump there, and you can never catch a chicken by running after it. And then what happened? This lady, she came and she just went, and she tapped on the ground, and all the chickens came running. All of them came running to her. And then she quickly grabbed one, and that was easy. I lost over 2 hours or so, I think maybe half a day, Allahu A'lam, in trying to catch a chicken. Fail. And she just made a few sounds, and instantly, the chickens responded to her. What was the difference? She had spent more time, right? She built a repertoire with the chickens. The chickens knew that, she's going to feed us, right? So they responded to her. So the prophets of Allah were given this training through hardship. They were made to deal with the animals so that they could learn how to deal with people who don't listen. How to deal with people who don't respond. Then we also see that the prophets of Allah were patient despite the rejection that they faced. In a hadith we learned the Prophet ﷺ said, no prophet from amongst the prophets will have as many followers as me. Muhammad ﷺ will have the greatest number of followers on the Day of Judgment. He said, indeed there will be amongst the prophets he who had no one believing in him except one man. On the Day of Judgment, some prophets will come and their ummah will be of how many people? One person. One person. Imagine if a person faces this kind of rejection. A person wants to accomplish something in their life, promote something in their life, and their business is not going anywhere, their idea is not going anywhere. So what do people do typically? They'll go commit suicide. Right? They will give up and then go do something else. or they will give up everything and just go live a normal life. But we see that the prophets of Allah, despite the rejection that they faced, they did not give up. They were patient. Something that they were supposed to do, they did it. Take the example of Nuh alayhi salam. In his time, people lived long lives. It is said that Nuh alayhi salam lived a life of 1,000 years. 50 years before prophethood and 950 after that. Now imagine, for how long is it that he called his people? How many, many years? Has it ever happened to you that you're trying to tell somebody to maybe pray salah, and you've told them in one way, you've told them in another way, you told them 5 years ago, and you're telling them again now, but you see no change in them? Then what happens typically? People say, leave them. Don't tell them. They don't want to do it. It's their choice. Why are you worrying so much? Be happy about your family, about your friends. At least they're praying. Why are you concerned about this person? Leave them alone. But we see that the prophets of Allah, they did not give up. In Surah Nuh, we learn in detail about how Nuh alayhi salam called his people. That دَعَوْتُهُمْ جِهَارًا, he called them openly. That he called them privately, on an individual basis, one-on-one. When that didn't work, he called them openly. He called them in the night, he called them in the day. He called them in their meetings, he called them in different ways. He approached many different ways in order to call them. But they did not respond. And then eventually the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descended on those people. But Nuh alayhi salam is an excellent example of patience, of determination. Something that you have to do it. Give it your 100% and do not give up. If you really believe in it. If you strongly believe in it. It's important, it's right. It doesn't matter if the whole world is against you. Do it. This is a sign of successful people. They don't get afraid from the opposition that they face. They don't get afraid by the comments that they hear. When they're determined to do something, they will do it. And we see that amongst the prophets of Allah, they were the ulul azm. Who were the ulul azm? Those who had a lot of determination. Al-azm means determination. That when you're determined, you've made up your mind, I'm going to do it, and you're determined. And then despite the difficulty you face, you do it. So all of the prophets of Allah, yes, they had firm resolve. But amongst them, there were 5 who had a lot of determination. Who were they? Nuh alayhi salam first of all. Secondly, Ibrahim alayhi salam. And then Musa alayhi salam. And then Isa alayhi salam. And then Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What is it that makes Nuh alayhi salam of the ulul azm? Like we just discussed right now. For 950 years he was doing da'wah to his people. 950 years, that's not something small. Have you tried doing something for 9 days in a row? I mean, this was our 4th session, right? And today I was getting a little tired. Just 4 days. Imagine, you're doing something for 9 days in a row. It's difficult. 1 year? Is that difficult? Oh yeah. 9 months? Is that difficult? Of course. Imagine 950 years. He was a human being. But yet he did it. He had a lot of determination. And this is doing something while the whole community is against you. The whole community calls you crazy. Remember when he was building the ship, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to build the ship, his people passed by making fun of him. سَخِرُوا مِنْهُ. They mocked at him. What are you doing? Where are you going to go? This is a new thing that you've started now. You really are crazy. All the prophets, they were called majnoon. They were called crazy. People whose mind did not work properly anymore, who were possessed by the jinn. People called them like this. They humiliated them in public. But yet, the prophets of Allah had a lot of determination to pass on the message that was given to them. After Nuh alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam. He is also of the ulul azm. Why is he of the ulul azm? What's so special about him? What comes to your mind? What is it that makes him of the ulul azm? Think about his early life. Okay? When he was young, and he realized that idolatry is wrong, and he spoke up. Can you imagine? Everybody in your community, your father involved, is doing something. This is what business, economy revolves around. This is what culture revolves around. This is what your celebrations revolve around. Religion and your worldly life are very much interconnected. They're basically one. There's no difference between the two. And he realized that this shirk is not right. And he stood up against them. He asked that what are all of these tamasil that you and your people, O my father, are akifun to? You are just devoutly worshipping. What are these? Have you ever tried to say something that contradicts, that goes against what the rest of the people are saying? Like, for example, there is a discussion going on amongst your friends and everybody's talking about a particular thing in one way and you say, no, I don't think it's like that. And then the whole crowd turns against you. Even if you disagree, you'll say, you know what? I'm not going to say anything. I'll just keep quiet. Because if I speak up, I'm going to invite a lot of trouble. So I might as well stay silent. At least I disapprove of the wrong in my heart. That is also a level of faith. We choose to remain silent. But imagine Ibrahim a.s., what courage, what determination he had that he spoke up as a child. And remember how his father responded towards him, how he reacted? You know what he said basically? That you either stop all of this or I'm going to stone you to death. Imagine. A father is telling his son, you better stop this or I'm going to kill you. And I'm not going to kill you with a gun. I'm going to put you in a hole in the ground so that you're not able to move at all and stone you, one stone after the other until you die, you bleed to death. Just imagine hearing that from your father. Wouldn't that shake you up? Wouldn't that shake you up? You'd lose all your confidence. But Ibrahim a.s., he knew Tawheed is right, Shirk is wrong. He remained firm. And remember, when all of his people are collecting firewood to light up a fire that was bigger than anything people had seen before. This huge fire that was so big that they couldn't even go near it in order to push Ibrahim a.s. into it. They had to use a catapult in order to throw him in there. Yes, it was that massive. They burnt it for days and days so that it was huge. And then they threw him in that fire. Just imagine having to go through that. And he came out of that fire perfectly fine. Did he stop there? No, he continued. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him elsewhere. And then, so much of his life he spent, he was so old, he didn't have any children. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him a child, Ismail, Ishaq. And what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, leave Ismail and his mother in the middle of nowhere, basically. In the middle of nowhere. There's no washroom, there's no water, there's no food, there's no tree, nothing. In the middle of nowhere. No people come there. Imagine how hard it must have been for him to leave his son over there. Have you ever had to leave your children? Maybe with somebody? Is it difficult? Yes. Sometimes it's very difficult. But if you know that there's enough toys for them, they'll be kept busy, there's enough snacks for them, they'll be happy, then you're happy to leave them there. Like right now, many mothers have left their children in the babysitting area. Right? Why? Because we are confident that inshallah children will be fine. We are here, we are accessible, the room is comfortable, the babysitters are experienced, they're professional, so they know what they're doing. So you're comfortable. You have that, peace of mind and heart. But imagine leaving your child in a place like Makkah, where not even a single person inhabited that place. When there was no Kaaba over there. Why did he do that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him. Ulul azm. He had determination. A lot of determination to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, Aslim. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ أَسْلِمْ قَالَ أَسْلَمْتُ. He said, I've already submitted. I've already submitted لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Any command from Allah, instantly he responded. He didn't hesitate. And there's numerous examples in the life of Ibrahim a.s. that show as to why he was of the Ulul Azm. After Ibrahim a.s., Musa a.s. Why was he of the Ulul Azm? Because he had to deal with Fir'aun first of all, for many, many years, and then he had to deal with the Bani Israel, which is another story completely. Right? So he had to deal with Fir'aun and Bani Israel. The most difficult when it comes to leaders, when it comes to kings, was who? Fir'aun. Out of all the tyrants of the world, who was the worst? Fir'aun. And when it comes to people also, out of all the different communities, who was the most difficult to deal with? It was the Bani Israel. Because they believed in Musa a.s., yet they disobeyed him and disrespected him. Now, the rest of the prophets, their nations, what was their way? They rejected them completely. If they rejected them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent punishment upon them. So they were done with. And if their nation believed in them, then they were obedient, compliant. Now, Bani Israel was neither here nor there. Neither here nor there. Very difficult to deal with. Imagine, he brings them out of Egypt, safely crosses the sea, and then what happens when they're in the desert? They make it to the city which they're supposed to enter. Musa a.s. says, go ahead and enter. And obviously there was enemy inside, so they had to fight the enemy. But the Bani Israel said, no. Inna hahuna qa'idin. We're just sitting right here. You and your Lord go fight. You and your Lord, O Musa, go and fight the people. And when the coast is clear, then let us know and we'll enter as victors. That's victory. So imagine Musa a.s. had to deal with them. And at that point, Musa a.s. was so disheartened that he said, Oh Allah, fafruq, separate between me and these disobedient people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused Musa a.s. to die soon after that. So basically the Bani Israel did not enter the city in the life of Musa a.s. but much after him. After Musa a.s. or Isa a.s. He was of the Ulul Azm. Why? What made him of the Ulul Azm? What comes to your mind from the life of Isa a.s.? He had to deal with who? With the Bani Israel, with the Yahud. And that was also again very, very difficult. He had to deal with the people who believed they were very righteous, who believed they did not need any message, any reminder whatsoever, who believed they were perfectly fine, but yet they were far from the right guidance. Has it ever happened that you're trying to tell somebody you're doing this wrong and they're not even listening to you? Let me give you an example. Somebody who's driving, okay? They're supposed to be going to a particular destination and they are not on the right street, on the right road, on the right highway, or rather freeway. And you tell them, no, you're supposed to take a right here. And they say, no, you're supposed to go left here. And they insist, and because they're driving, you can't exactly force them. So they go left. And you're sitting with them, and you're like, please listen to me. We're not supposed to go this way, we're supposed to go that way. They're like, no, we're going fine. We're just going to go there, over here, over there, and then we're going to get to our destination. Are they going to make it? Why get somewhere in an hour when you can get there in 5 minutes? Would you be frustrated? Oh yeah. You'd be very frustrated. Would you be angry? Of course, very angry. Imagine how difficult it must have been for Isa a.s. to deal with the Bani Israel who thought they were perfectly fine, but they were doing everything wrong. And then instead of listening to Isa a.s., instead of cooperating with him, they were opposing him. He had to have a lot of resolve. So he was of the Ulul Azm. And after Isa a.s., who was of the Ulul Azm? Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Because he knew that he was the last prophet. After him, no prophet was coming. If his people did not believe, if the religion he brought was not established, then mankind would forever be astray and misguided. Imagine that heavy responsibility. Either I do it or it's not going to be done. Imagine that responsibility. Which is why we see that when certain chapters were revealed of the Prophet ﷺ, and in those chapters, a lot of the people of the past were mentioned about how when they rejected, the punishment of Allah was sent upon them, and they were finished basically. Once Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I see a lot of white in your hair. That you've become old. And the Prophet ﷺ said, شَيَّبَتْنِي هُودْ وَأَخَوَاتُهَا. That Surah Hud and its sisters, meaning the surahs which are like it, they have made me old. Because imagine that sense of responsibility that I have to convey the message and the people are not responding well. Imagine that burden, that stress, that weight upon him. But did he give up? He didn't give up. Imagine, remember the battle of Badr, 300 men facing 1,000. Just imagine, 300 facing 1,000. The Prophet ﷺ prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that time, and in his dua he mentioned that, "Oh Allah, if you wish, you will not be worshipped after today." Meaning in the right way. That if we are finished today, if you do not help us, then what's going to happen? If your last messenger is finished today, then what's going to happen to your people? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped him. He gave him victory. So the Prophet ﷺ was really of the ulul azm. He did not give up. He was of those who possessed great resolve. And this is a great lesson for us. There are many things that we learn are important in life that have to be done. But you know where we're lacking? In our confidence, in our determination. Because once we make up our mind, I have to do this, then there's nothing that can be difficult. Whether it is that you want to get out of riba, or you want to start doing something, or you want to leave something, whatever it may be. Once you make up your mind, I have to do this, or I cannot do this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make a way for you. But you know what is needed? Determination from you. When a person takes that one step towards Allah, then what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes 10 steps towards him. Allah gives tawfiq, He gives ability. To who? To the one who wants to do something. The one who shows that desire. And if we have that burning desire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely allow us. Definitely allow us. Then things are made easy. I remember somebody once came up to me and they said that, my bank account, I get interest in it every year. The bank gives me interest. Rather, every month. So what do I do with that interest? I said, you're not supposed to be taking it. They're like, but the bank gives it. I'm like, you're not supposed to be taking it. You cannot mix halal money with haram money. Tayyib and khabith. If you mix it, a whole lot of tayyib will also get ruined. Like if you have a cup of milk and you drop just a teaspoon of vinegar, what's going to happen to that milk? It's going to turn into buttermilk. Right? It's going to change. So just like that, pure money, if you add to that even 3-4 cents of haram a month, it's going to ruin it. Because in the Quran, Allah says that يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى. Allah destroys riba. Meaning the money in which is riba, there is no blessing in that. No blessing in that at all. So this one captain says, no, I get it. I don't have any choice. I said, go to them and tell them that I don't want any interest. And if you don't listen to me, I'm going to switch. I'm going to go to a different bank and see how they will listen to you. And she said, yes, they listen to me. So you have to make up your mind that I'm not going to receive this. I'm not going to take this. And you go and tell them very calmly that, look, I cannot accept this. And if you cannot make this accommodation for me, then I have to make some other decision. I have to switch elsewhere. And they don't want your money to go. They want to do everything to keep your money in their bank. So they're going to do anything to keep you happy. So this is true. You make up your mind to do something, you have that resolve. It's difficult. It's hard. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely create a way for you.